Okay, now we'll keep it running. Good evening, I'm Alan Adamson, and this is a special present from Larry Lupkin and myself to Nancy and Steve. No. Okay.
Kill it.
Kill it. We have another, oh, I see it.
He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing.
As part of our effort to help you integrate into Japanese society, we prepared a training segment here. And these, sorry, cut, and action.
You're great at ad-libbing. The odds really very effective.
Okay. As part of our effort to help you integrate into Japanese society seamlessly, we've prepared a training segment. Mr. Lupkin and I will take you through that now to help you in your transition into Japanese society. First, some key phrases. Our Japanese expert, Fumio, will help you in this regard. First, in an emergency, it is critical to know what to say. We have lines for both of you to use in any emergency situation. Nancy, your line will be, "That's okay, Booz Allen is paying." Remember, in an emergency you say, "That's okay, Booz Allen is paying." Fumio?
わかりました。酔っ払いのアレンが払います。
Right.
Steve, your line in any emergency is, "That's okay, DMB&B is paying."
はい、わかりました。DMB&B が払いますよ。
So remember, if you're arrested, if you're caught, if anything bad happens to you, if you break things, if you damage society, and there looks like there's going to be a big liability, "That's okay, Booz Allen is paying," Nancy. And Steve, your line is, "That's okay, DMB&B is paying." Now on to other important phrases you'll need to know. Part of your mission will be to undertake significant shopping. So these are two phrases that you'll need to know. Nancy, your phrase will be, "I'll take 5 of them. Please bill my husband."
その5つをもらいます。私の主人が払います。
Or you might have to say, "Do you have small pillows with ducks on them?"
アヒルのための小さい枕ありますか？
Okay. Steve, your line in this shopping situation for either one will be, "I don't know this woman. Please have her arrested."
こんな女性は知りませんよ。捕まえてください。
So, important lines to know. Steve, you better practice this quite a bit. You'll be doing a lot of this, so this was another important phrase we thought you should learn. Checking into hotels. The lettering was specially done by our graphics department. Nancy, your line will be, "Can someone come up and turn down the beds? I don't know how."
どなたか私の部屋に来てベッドカバーを剥がしてくださる人いますか？
Steve, your line will be, "Do the beds have magic fingers?"
このホテルには、バイブレーター付きのベッドはありますか？
Obviously, you're sleeping with Nancy. An important line to know this. Bring plenty of quarters with you to Japan. And finally, an important area, at a restaurant. Learning how to get into Japanese restaurants and get out of line will be important. Nancy, your line will be, "Yes, I understand octopus eyes are a house specialty, but can I have tuna on white with the crust cut off and mayo?"
タコの目玉がこの店の自慢料理だっていうことはわかるんですけど、私にはツナとマヨネーズのサンドイッチをくれませんか？パンの耳は切ってください。
Nancy, I want you to repeat that right now back for us. We'll wait a second here while you repeat that whole phrase back. Not bad. Steve, your line will be, 2 orders of octopus eyes, please.
タコの目玉を2人前ください。
We'll be back with another portion of your training tape in 1 minute. Okay, stop it for a second. Welcome back. This is going to be a very important part, Nancy, Steve, of your training in order to integrate into Japanese society. What we've asked Fumio to do for you now, Nancy and Steve, is explain traditional husband and wife roles to you, so that when you're living in Tokyo, no one will really suspect you're American. So we're going to go through a typical evening on the appropriate behavior for both of you. Fumio will help me take you through this. This will be critical to your acceptance in Japanese society. We'll start off with a typical situation. Steve, you've just come home.
今帰った。
Now, Nancy, your response must be,
あ
let's start again. Cut. Okay. Cut.
いや、
Let's-
知らん。
No. This is a very important part. Welcome back. This is a very important part of your training, Nancy and Steve. We're going to show you how to get through starting again. This is an important part of your training, Nancy and Steve. Fumio and I are going to take you through typical situations and teach you the appropriate behavior that will allow you to assimilate into Japanese society. An important situation is after work. Steve, you're just coming home. Nancy will greet you at the door. Nancy, what would Nancy do when her husband comes home?
You should be sitting down and bow and say, I've been waiting for you in Japanese. お疲れ様でした。お帰りなさい。
Remember, Nancy, you must be sitting and bowing when Stephen returns home. This is very important every evening you do this. Next, Nancy would ask, what would Nancy ask first when Steve comes home?
You should ask Steve, which do you like first, taking shower or dinner in Japanese? お風呂にいたしますか、食事にいたしますか? It should be getting off his jacket.
So it's important that Nancy takes Stephen's jacket off immediately when he returns home. Steve might say shower, and the word for shower is?
お風呂 in Japanese.
And Nancy would say, good. What would Steve do next after having Nancy take his jacket off?
For example, you take out your salary pouch and you pass to the Nancy.
So Steve must give his entire salary upon coming home to Nancy.
Yeah.
Every night.
And not every night. But,
Once a week?
Yeah.
Once a week, Steve will turn over his entire earnings to Nancy, and Nancy, we know you will manage the budget very carefully. Nancy might then say something like, what would Nancy respond in English when Steve...
I'm deeply thankful for your working every day. In Japanese, どうも毎日お疲れ様です。大変感謝しております。
And Nancy should bow at this point again,
Yeah.
right? Let's go through some other situations. Let's pretend Nancy has prepared the bath or the shower for Stephen. And what should Nancy ask Stephen when Stephen is ready to take a bath?
If Steve shouts from inside of the bathroom, for example, "Oi, Nancy," should come into the door of bathroom and sit down and say, "Shall I wash your back?" In Japanese, お背中をお流しいたしましょうか?
And this will be important, Nancy. We'll be washing Stephen's back, I would say 7 days a week, and it's about time you do that. Nancy, after you have cooked dinner, you will tell Steve what you cooked for him. What might that be? What would a typical dinner be?
Yeah, for example, this evening I cooked sashimi that you prefer in Japanese. 今日はあなたの好きな刺身を用意いたしました。
So Nancy, you must always do what Steve prefers. Cut. Alright. You didn't cut, okay. Push it again. Nancy and Steve, this is a critical part of your training in our efforts to assimilate you into Japanese society. We're going to give you some key phrases that should get you through almost every day of your life in Tokyo. I've asked our Japanese expert, Fumio, to help me with this important part of the training. The first phrase we need you to learn, Nancy and Steve, is what to say in an emergency. We don't suspect you'll be getting into these every day, but certainly once a week there'll be an emergency. and knowing the proper Japanese phrase will be critical. We prepared sample dialogues for you. Nancy, when you get into an emergency, when you break something expensive, when you cause an accident with a car, when you damage things, when people are chasing you, you say, "That's okay, Booz Allen is paying." Fumio, how would that sound?
Japanese? わかりました。それは酒飲みのアレンが払います。
Nancy, repeat that. And Fumio, one more time, what was that?
わかりました。それは酒飲みのアレンが払います。
Work on that phrase, Nancy. You'll need to know that. Steve, your phrase, and this is another important one, Steve. That's okay, DMB&B is paying. That's okay, DMB&B is paying. Fumio?
わかりました。それは DMB&B が払います。
You won't be saying that very often, Steve, because Alan wants to continue working in New York. But if you should have an emergency, use it once or twice. Steve, you won't be doing any of this, but we prepared a dialogue for you just in case. Nancy, pay close attention here. This will be your daily activity. Shopping is our next dialogue. We have two phrases for you, Nancy, because you'll be doing so much of this in that market, and it's an important part of your mission. First phrase is, "I'll take 5 of them. Please bill my husband." Fumio?
それを5つください。主人が払います。
Steve would respond, "I don't know this woman. Please have her arrested." Steve, pay close attention. Make sure the word arrested you pick up. And Fumio will repeat that for you.
こんな人は知りませんよ。彼女を捕まえてください。
And if Steve wanted to get excited and say, "Please have her arrested," what would that be?
こんな人は知りませんよ。捕まえてください。
Remember that, Steve. That will be key. Next, Nancy, is this phrase, also very important in your shopping. Do you have small pillows with ducks on them? Nancy will be asking us a lot because they're difficult to find in Tokyo, but we are sure you'll find them. And Fumio, how would that sound in Japanese? Do you have small pillows with ducks on them?
昼のための小さな枕はありますか？
And Nancy, with that phrase, you can spend day in and day out looking for those pillows that Stephen treasures so much. In fact, you may want to buy several for his birthday. I'm sure that's a thoughtful gift. We know how thoughtful you can be. Another thing you'll be doing as you travel throughout the Orient is checking into hotels. We've prepared another dialogue for that purpose so that you will not be noticed as foreigners as readily. Nancy, your phrase will be, "Can someone come up and turn down the beds? I don't know how." You'll be able to deliver this with feeling because this is in fact a true condition. Fumio in Japanese?
どなたか私の部屋に来てベッドカバーを外してもらえませんか？
And Steve, this is another important phrase for you. Do the beds have magic fingers?
ベッドにバイブレーターはついてますか？
Make sure to bring quarters with you, Steve, because it's going to be a long 2 years without your companionship that you had in the New York market. Without that, we'll leave that woman out of it for now. And finally, at a restaurant, it is important to know how to order food, and Fumi and I prepared a sample dialogue to help you in this respect. Nancy, your key phrase will be, "Yes, I understand octopus eyes are a house specialty, but can I have tuna on white with the crust cut off and mayo anyway?"
タコの目玉がこの店の自慢料理だっていうのは分かるんですけど、私には、ツナとマヨネーズのサンドイッチをください。パンの耳は切ってください。
And Steve, to make sure the Japanese society continues their respect for the American man, you will say, "2 orders of octopus eyes, please. I love them."
タコの目玉を2人前ください。
Thank you, Fumio, and we think this will be an important part of your training. We'll be back in a minute for lesson 2 of Nancy and Steve in Tokyo. Come back. This is your second lesson on how we hope you will become totally assimilated into Japanese culture. Fumio and I will now take you through several domestic situations and the appropriate behavior so that when you're at home, no one will suspect you do not know how to live in Japanese society. First, the most important thing. I understand, Fumio, that whenever Nancy talks to Steve, she must talk in a certain way. Can you tell us Should she talk in a certain way to Stephen?
You should, Nancy, if you ask something to Steve, if Steve is Japanese, Steve should answer by very short sentence, like yoshi, oi, such kind of very short sentence.
So it's not appropriate for Steve to have long conversations with Nancy. Every sentence should be very short and direct.
Exactly.
I think you'll get along much better in this way. Now, Steve, pretend you've just come home from work. And what should Nancy do when Stephen comes home from work, Romeo?
First of all, you should sitting down on the floor and bowing.
Let's repeat that, Nancy. You should be sitting on the floor. Excuse me. and and bowing. Nancy, make sure that every day you sit on the floor and bow and Steve goes down. We'll try to continue here. And what should Nancy say when Steve comes up?
First of all, you have to say that I've been waiting for you in Japanese. どうもお帰りなさい。お疲れ様でした。
Next, Nancy, you should do what first? What should Nancy do next for Stephen upon his return home?
You should do getting off his jacket, and you say, which do you like first, taking shower or dinner? In Japanese, お風呂にいたしますか、お食事にいたしますか
Remember, Nance, take off his jacket and offer him shower or dinner. Steve might say,
風呂
which would be shower. And Nancy would immediately respond,
はい
no more, Nancy, just the word hi. No ands, ifs, or buts. Hi, whatever Steve wants. Important. At this point, Steve will do what? What is customary for Steve to do?
For example, one day, Steve take out your salary, portion of your salary, and you pass to the Nancy.
So Nancy will have Steve's salary once a week?
Or once a month.
Once a month, and we'll have responsibility for managing
Yes.
Steve's budget?
Exactly.
And so, Steve, you will turn over the Booz Allen paycheck once a month, and you will sleep soundly knowing that Nancy is devoting most of that money to savings. I suspect Nancy's rate of savings will be in excess of 90% in Tokyo. Then Nancy, after receiving the salary, would say something like,
you should say, I'm deeply thankful for your working. It should be bowing. And in Japanese, どうもお疲れ様でした。お給料ありがとうございます。
Nancy, remember the bow after he gives you the salary, and remember to express your gratitude. Now we move to the bathroom and assume that Nancy has finished drawing the bath or preparing the shower for Stephen. And what might Nancy ask at this time?
Shall I wash your back? You have to sit down in front of the door, and you say, shall I wash your back? Gently.
And what might Steve say then? Again, a grunt at this point would be appropriate. No discussion of, that's very nice of you, Nancy, how sweet of you. Steve, you must only grunt at that point. After Steve returns from the shower, Nancy will be at the dining room table. And what might Nancy say after Steve comes out of the shower?
For example, I cooked sashimi that you prefer. In Japanese, 今日は刺身をあなたの好きな刺身を作りました。
Should Nancy talk to Steve over dinner, or should he do something else?
Excuse me?
Do you think it would be good if Nancy talked to Stephen, or should Stephen read the paper and ask for things, or?
Yeah, for that thing. Steve, you should reading newspaper in dinner. you never see Nancy's face, and you are reading a newspaper, and you answer, so, わかった。Such kind of thing.
Good. So we feel that this type of behavior at home, Nancy and Steve, will do wonders to help you integrate into Japanese society. And what makes us very, very optimistic about your ability to do this is we know your behavior at home now is so closely correlated to this that the adjustment will be very, very small. We'll be back shortly with the final portion of your Japanese training. Action. Nancy and Steve, this is lesson 2 of your program to integrate into Japanese society. Fumio and I are going to take you through several domestic situations now to help you act and live a true Japanese life during your stay in Tokyo. To help you do this, we will do a little role playing. I will play the part of Steve, and Fumio will play the part of Nancy. But before we start, there is one important aspect of how Nancy and Steve talk to each other. And Fumio will explain that now. When Nancy talks, Steve must answer in a certain way. Can you tell us, Steve, about this?
You should answer to Nancy by very short sentence, not long sentence. Only say or hi or わかった. Such kind of very short sentence.
So Steve, it's important. You should not have any long conversations with Nancy. You just answer hi or whatever short phrase. You mustn't be seen talking at length to Nancy. It is a sign of weakness, and we would not want to demonstrate that to the neighbors in your apartment building. So we'll start now with our situation, and the typical situation is Steve coming home from work, and I'm Steve. I come through the door and I say, Nancy, I'm home from work. Nancy would answer,
I've been waiting for you in Japanese. どうもお疲れ様でした.
and what would Nancy do at that point?
You should be sitting down the floor and you are bowing.
So Nancy, when I come home, I being Steve in this situation, you must be sitting on the floor and bowing. And you should start practicing this before your departure to Tokyo because it is something you'll be doing every day. I would come in the door then. You have been waiting for me, and you sit and you bow, Nancy. And I would say something like, is that correct pronunciation?
Yeah.
Okay.
True. Exactly.
And Nancy, your next line would be,
which do you like first? Taking shower or dinner? In Japanese, お風呂になさいますか? お食事になさいますか?
my response is st or st. How would you pronounce that in Japanese?
For example, you prefer shower first. You should say 風呂.
Furo. And nothing else. No, I would prefer shower, Nancy. It's simply the word shower that Steve must say. And then, Fumio, would Nancy do anything else? Would she help Steve at all?
So, Nancy, every time when Steve came from office, you every evening should get off his jacket gently.
And next, Steve would say salary, and nothing more than salary. And at what point, what would happen then, Fumio?
In this situation, you bring your salary from your office, and you take out your part of salary, and you pass to the Nancy.
This is very important, Steve. You must, when you come home from Booz Allen, take the Booz Allen salary and hand it directly over to Nancy. Any wavering from this procedure will immediately single you out as really not comfortable in Japanese society. And I'm sure, Steve, you'll sleep soundly every night knowing that Nancy is in complete charge of your personal finances. Nothing could be more secure. Nancy, upon receiving salary from Steve, might say,
I'm deeply thankful for your working every day in Japanese. どうもいつもご苦労様です。ありがとうございます。
So we move on after Nancy has removed every last cent from Stephen's salary to the bathroom. And Steve would be getting into the shower. And what might Nancy say at this point?
If Steve say from the bathroom, for example, please say oi.
Oi.
Yes. So Nancy, you going to the bathroom door and sit down and say, shall I wash your back? In Japanese, お背中を流しましょうか?
And so you may want to practice this on one of your dogs. You need to be very good at washing backs since you'll be doing it every night. Steve might respond again with, right?
Right.
Nothing more, Steve, no. Thanks for washing my back, Nancy. You've done a fine job. Just, And I think with a lot of practice, Steve, you'll get that Japanese phrase down perfectly, and you'll be much happier afterwards. After your shower, Steve, and Nancy will have, I'm sure, cleaned up the bathroom afterwards, you will arrive in the dining room, and Nancy might say something like,
I cooked sashimi that you prefer. In Japanese, 今日はあなたの好きなお刺身を用意しましたよ。
And Fumio, what should Stephen do at the dinner table? Should he talk to Nancy, or what should he do?
No, you should reading like a newspaper or watching TV or anyway, you should not talk with Nancy.
And this will be important, Steve. This will certainly help the migraines you've been getting over the past 2 years. We think focusing on television and the newspaper during dinner will alleviate those migraines. We'll be back with the final portion of your Japanese training in a moment. And now, Nancy and Steve, it's time for our final portion of your lesson. These 3 phrases are phrases you must commit to memory immediately. And so we'll take great care in teaching you them. The first phrase, Steve, this is for you. Your phrase would say, Nancy, who is a father? Fumio?
Nancy, 誰が父親だい?
One more time, slowly.
Nancy, 誰が父親だい?
So repeat that. Can I hear that, Stephen? Not bad. Work on that phrase. Nancy, this is your critical phrase. Where is the bathroom? Fumio, how would that sound?
トイレはどこですか?
Help her point out which words are which.
トイレはどこですか?
So Nancy, repeat that 10 times tonight because you'll be using that a lot. And finally, this phrase for both of you. Key phrase, when is the next flight to New York? Fumio?
ニューヨークへの次の便はいつ出発しますか?
One more time. Point out the words so it's easier for them to follow.
ニューヨークへの次の便はいつ出発しますか?
Very easy. I'm sure you've already got that down pat. Practice that once and you'll know it. So Nancy and Steve, good luck on this mission. The entire country is counting on you. Fumio, thank you for your help. I understand we're going to fly you over to Tokyo to act as a consultant in case they get into trouble. And you'll be there to help them. But we think you'll manage fine. Have a good trip. there it is, home for the next 2 years. Take a good look. Perfect. Ah.
Good evening. The recent market performance, sorry. The recent market performance has bothered many of us on Wall Street. It has also affected millions of investors across this country. I know one particular client who called me crying because of the money he lost. He said he would be less attractive to women than he is now. I tried to console him. I said, Alan, that would be impossible. Other investors, of course, have taken a more philosophical attitude. Steve Barlow, for example, who said, Larry, the money I lost doesn't matter, so long as I have the love of a good woman. Let's all hope, for Steve's sake, that Becky doesn't find out about her. Of course, none were hit harder than those who make their livings and have their fortunes intimately tied with Wall Street itself. One investment banker called me. He said, Larry, it's gotten out of hand. Things are terrible. I'm going to have to move to a smaller apartment. I'm going to have to cut down on my lavish style of living. Personally, I thought Van was overreacting, but hey, he's entitled. And then, of course, there were those unfortunate ones who just began their career on Wall Street. One particularly comes to mind. Let's call him Eric. Eric, a graduate of Harvard Business School, just embarked on his career as a mergers and acquisition specialist for a major Wall Street investment bank. After the crash, he had to go home to tell his wife, let's call her Betsy, that they would not be able to afford that dream house they had been planning for. He told her the news. He said, Betsy, will you still love me? She replied, of course I will. I'll miss you, but I'll always love you. But Wall Street is concerned, and we intend to do something about it. From the highest paid arbitrageur, currently out on bail and living in his multi-million-dollar estate in Westchester, to the lowliest clerk, currently picketing in front of the exchange in a blizzard, we intend to do something about it. Most of the fault can be laid with the foreigners, particularly the Japanese. We're not going to roll over and play dead. We have a plan of action. And now, to give you a historical perspective to the current dilemma we find ourselves in, I turn it over to Walter Cronkite. Walter? Good evening. The recent performance of the market... Oh, sorry. The recent performance of the market has caused grave concern across the entire United States. I know it has affected everyone. I have clients calling me. One client in particular said that because of the money that he's lost in the market, he will be less attractive to women than he has been in the past. I try to console him. I said, Alan, that would be impossible. Others, of course, take a more philosophical approach. I know, for example, Steve Barlow, who lost a lot of money in this market, said, at least I have the love of a good woman. Let's hope for Steve's sake Becky doesn't find out about her. And of course, no one was hit harder than those who make their living on Wall Street, whose entire career and financial well-being depends on the stock market. One investment banker I know called me to say, Larry, that he told his wife he would have to cut down on his lavish style of living. He could no longer afford the luxury of living in a studio apartment and would now be looking for smaller living quarters. Personally, I thought Van was overreacting, but hey, the guy's entitled. And then, of course, there are those unfortunates whose career on Wall Street are in their infancy. Sad, but I know one investment banker a specialist in the mergers and acquisition department of a major investment bank. Let's say his name is Eric. Eric called me to tell me that he had to break the news to his wife, let's call her Betsy, that he would not be able to fulfill the contractual obligations of his prenuptial agreement by buying her a 7-bedroom house with swimming pool in Scarsdale next door to her mother. He told her one night, he said, "Betsy, will you still always love me?" To which she replied, "Of course I'll always love you. I'll miss you, but I'll always love you." We on Wall Street are terribly concerned about this situation. Most of the blame, of course, can be laid at the hands of the foreigners, primarily the Japanese. And we're all concerned, from the highest paid arbitrageur, currently out on bail and living his multi-million-dollar estate in Westchester, to the lowliest clerk, currently picketing in front of the exchange for a $25 a week raise. And we have taken action. For a historical perspective of our problem, let me turn it over now to Walter Cronkite. Walter?
I like the first one better.
Good evening. I'm sure all of you are aware of the performance in the market. Excuse me. There it is. The recent performance in the market has caused grave concern, has affected millions of people throughout this country. I, of course, as a stockbroker, hear it and experience it firsthand. I had one client who called me to say that because of the money he lost over the last couple of weeks, women won't find him as attractive as they had in the past. I tried to console him. I said, "Alan, that would be impossible." Of course, other investors have taken a more philosophical attitude. For example, Steve Barlow seems unconcerned about the money he lost. He's told me, "Larry, it doesn't matter, so long as I know I have the love of a good woman." Let's hope for Steve's sake Becky doesn't find out about her. Of course, none were hit harder than those who work and make their living in the street, whose very careers are threatened at current times, not to mention their financial well-being. One investment banker I'm friendly with called me. He said, "Larry, because of this, he told his wife he would have to cut down on his lavish style of living. He would have to move to smaller quarters, not needing the luxury of living in a studio apartment anymore." Personally, I thought Van was overreacting, but hey, the guy's entitled. And then, of course, there are those on Wall Street whose career is in their infancy. I know one poor, unfortunate soul. Let's call him Eric. A recent Harvard grad, now a specialist in the mergers and acquisition department of a major investment bank. He called me on the phone crying one day. He said, "Larry, I had to tell my wife, let's call her Betsy, that I would not be able to fulfill the contractual obligations of my prenuptial agreement. I would not be able to buy her this 7-bedroom center hall colonial with swimming pool and sun deck next door to her mother in Scarsdale that I had promised and had signed and notarized." I went to Betsy and I said, this is Eric telling me, "Will you still always love me?" To which Betsy replied, "Of course. I'll miss you, but I'll always love you." We on the street are terribly concerned about this dilemma. From the highest paid arbitrageur, currently out on bail in his multi-million-dollar estate in Greenwich, to the lowliest clerk, now picketing in a blizzard in front of the exchange for a $25 a week raise, we are concerned, we have taken action. Of course, most of the blame for the current dilemma can be laid at the hands of foreigners, particularly the Japanese, For a historical perspective to our current situation, I now turn it over to Walter Cronkite. Walter? Walter for that perspective. And now on to the heart. We at Wall Street saw this happening many years ago. We put in incredible amounts of money to start a fictitious corporation. We located it in the center of Manhattan. We gave them posh offices, private secretaries. Their employees got hefty salaries, unlimited expense accounts. We even picked a ridiculous name, Booz Allen, just for jokes. The people that worked there had only one real mission, although they told people they were consultants doing aerospace work. Give me a break. Their mission was to infiltrate the societies of our allies and, unfortunately, our enemies. Two such moles, the one who are going to Japan, Nancy and Steve, were spent exhaustive hours viewing, memorizing training tapes that we arduously prepared. And now I would like you to view a couple of them, just so you can get a fuck.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't care what Dan Rather says, you still haven't lost it. And now on to the heart of our discussion. We on Wall Street saw this coming many years ago, and we put a lot of assets behind it. We started a fictitious corporation located right in the middle of Manhattan. We paid its employees, those men and women, those brave men and women, lavish salaries. We gave them private secretaries, unlimited expense accounts, unlimited travel. And this corporation had only one objective. That is to train their employees to infiltrate the societies of our trading partners. Specifically, the Japanese, the Germans, the Saudi Arabians, and the Malaysians. Two of our moles, Nancy and Steve, have performed exceptionally well and are now departing to go to Japan. For years, Steve told people he was a consultant working on aerospace. Is that ridiculous or what? We even gave his firm a ridiculous name, Booz Allen. Give me a break, guys, huh? Now, they're going over there to combat the Yellow Peril. However, before this, they spent many years. With arduous training. We now give you a sample of their training tapes, which they have learned, watched many times, and of course, memorized. I blew it again. This is more important. Thank you, Walter, for that interesting perspective. I don't care what Dan Rather says about you. You still got it, old boy. But now we move to the heart of the matter. We at Wall Street spent millions and millions of dollars to combat this dilemma, which we saw many years before. We set up a fictitious corporation. We employed hundreds of people. We gave these employees lavish offices, an unlimited expense account, and exorbitant, some say ridiculous salaries. We concocted a silly name, Booz Allen. These employees were to tell people they were consultants working on aerospace. But in reality, what these employees were doing was to be able to infiltrate the societies of our trading partners, notably Japan, Germany, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia. Two of our moles, Nancy and Steve, are going over to Japan right now. I hope everyone out there can appreciate the arduous hours that they put in The training tapes they had to watch repeatedly, that they had to memorize, to know backwards and forwards, so that people would not be able to distinguish them from Japanese citizens. And now I would like you to view a couple of those training films so you can truly appreciate the kind of people that Nancy and Steve are. Walter, for that interesting report. I don't care what Dan Rather says, you still got it, old boy. We on Wall Street saw this peril coming many years before, and we put our money where our mouth is. We spent millions upon millions of dollars creating a fictitious corporation. We gave them a lavish suite of offices right in the center of Manhattan. We paid the employees, those dedicated men and women, exorbitant, some say ridiculous salaries. We gave them private secretaries, an unlimited expense account, and an AT&T card. We gave the firm a name that was a bit of a joke, Booz Allen. Those employees were to tell their friends, their family, that they were consultants working on aerospace projects. What they were really there for was to learn about the societies of our trading partners, notably Switzerland, Germany, Japan, and Saudi Arabia. They were to learn those societies completely so that they could seamlessly fit into that society, become a part of it, be our spies, do counterintelligence work if need be. Two of those moles, Nancy and Steve, are now departing for Japan. I want everyone who is now watching this tape to be able to appreciate the long, arduous hours that went into their training. The training films we prepared, the hours that Steve and Nancy spent watching and watching and watching these films, committing them to memory. I would like to show you now a couple of those training films so you can really appreciate the kind of people that Nancy and Steve are. After all, they are our only defense against the yellow peril.
Good evening. December 7, 1941. Forces of Imperial Japan invade the United States Naval Base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, a date which will live in infamy. 1959. The first Toyota makes its way to the American shore and begins an almost irreversible trend. 1961. Transistor technology is transferred to Japanese manufacturers, and by 1975, every radio and television purchased by an American consumer is stamped with that now famous slogan, "Made in Japan." 1979, Sony adopts American patents and begins the manufacture of the affordable home video cassette recorder. 1983, in spite of repeated lobbying efforts, the Japanese 1983. In spite of repeated lobbying efforts, the Japanese government refuses to permit the import and sale of goods manufactured by the United States. And now, in 1987, American society is about ready to even the score in a life and death battle in which the United States seeks revenge. Nancy goes to Japan. And now back to your moderator, Larry Lupkin. Action. Good evening, I'm Walter Cronkite, and this is The Way It Is. December 7, 1941. Forces of Imperial Japan invade the Japanese naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, a date which will live in infamy. 1959. The first Toyota makes its way to the American shore and begins an almost irreversible trend. 1961. Transistor technology is transferred to Japanese manufacturers, And by 1975, every radio and television purchased by an American consumer is stamped with that now famous slogan, "Made in Japan." 1979. Sony adopts American patents and begins the manufacture of the affordable home video cassette recorder. 1983. In spite of repeated lobbying efforts, the Japanese government refuses to permit the import and sale of goods manufactured in the United States. And now, 1987. American society is about to even the score in a life and death battle. The United States seeks revenge. Nancy goes to Japan. And now back to your moderator, Larry Lubkin. Action. Thank you, Larry. I'm Walter Cronkite, and this is The Way It Is. December 7, 1941. Forces of Imperial Japan invade the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, a date which will live in infamy. 1959. The first Toyota makes its way to the American shore and begins an almost irreversible trend. 1961. Transistor technology is transferred to Japanese manufacturers, and by 1975, every radio and television purchased by an American consumer is stamped with that now famous slogan, "Made in Japan." 1979. Sony adopts American patents and begins the manufacture of their affordable home video cassette recorders. 1983. In spite of repeated lobbying efforts, the Japanese government refuses to permit the import and sale of goods manufactured in the United States. And now, 1987. American society is about to even the score in a life and death struggle in which the United States seeks revenge. Nancy goes to Japan. And now, back to your moderator, Larry Lubkin. And action. Thank you, Larry. Good evening, I'm Walter Cronkite, and this is The Way It Is. December 7, 1941. Forces of Imperial Japan invade the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, a date which will live in infamy. 1959. The first Toyota makes its way to the American shores and begins an almost irreversible trend. 1961. Transistor technology is transferred to Japanese manufacturers, and by 1975, every radio and television purchased by an American consumer is stamped with that now famous slogan, "Made in Japan." 1983. In spite of repeated lobbying efforts, the Japanese government refuses to permit the import and sale of goods manufactured in the United States. And now, 1987. American society is about to even the score in a life and death battle. The United States seeks revenge. Nancy goes to Japan. And now back to your moderator, Larry Lubkin.